You are listening to the Beltway Wars Invitational podcast, with your hosts Adam Jackson and Patrick Wheelton. Enjoy the show.
Welcome back, everyone, to your Week 15 recap show here on the Beltway Wars Invitational Podcast. We are your tonight. We have three semi-finalist hosts, wonderful hosts. Myself, Patrick Wheelton, Adam Jackson, and owner of the Cumberland Countryman, Jacob Krieger, here, putting the kids to bed and jumping on the podcast with Adam and I this evening. This will be three quarters of the Final Four in the Beltway Wars Invitational League. Dustin Summers being the other, and spurning us for the Maryland Terps game tonight. So he got the invite, so I don't want it to feel like we're leaving Dustin out, but he did get the invite. So I guess we'll start off the show. We're going to do things a little bit differently now that we're fully in playoff mode. We're going to talk a little bit about Adam's bye week, how it went, how Tyreek Hill is feeling. Curious to get the scoop from the owner of the... I don't see it because the bye week's not here. What's your team name? The Union Bridge Bay Sharks.
There you go.
The Union Bridge Bay Sharks. But first, so Adam, do you have any thoughts about Week 15?
So Week 15, we had a lot of interesting matchups, a lot of close games in terms of the NFL and the Beltway Wars Invitational. Dustin and Charlie's really came down to the wire, where Dustin actually benched his kicker to ensure his victory against Charlie. Then we had a little bit of a close matchup between Pat and Brian. Brian and Pat had wide receivers going into Monday Night Football. That'd be DK Metcalf and Devontae Smith. And then Jake's matchup, and the actual one that I predicted that Mike would win. Jake wins in a blowout here by 40 points against Mike. Injuries abound, Mike, this year. Week 15, let's see, in terms of the NFL. No, not really. Ravens look good, so we'd like to see that. The resurgent Browns with Joe Flacco at the helm continue to do very well. So that's just kind of my thing. A lot of quarterback injuries in the AFC, which is very interesting in terms of playoff scenarios and who the Ravens have to play. But the Ravens have a big matchup this week against San Francisco on Christmas night, so that will be a very interesting showing.
Yes, indeed. And I should also ask that same question of our guest host today, Jake Krieger, Packers fan Jake Krieger. How do you feel about where the Packers are, and what do you make of this fantasy season so far for your team in this league?
Yeah, I mean, Packers not feeling as great. I mean, they did not have a good week this week. Just past 2 weeks, just let down. Defense letting up scores at the end of the games, and plays just not able to stop. Jordan Love looked a little bit better this week, but after being on fire for 3 weeks, the past 2 games, he's kind of put up some duds. So we'll see. Not as high on my Packers as I am on my own fantasy football team. I mean, as far as the season went for me, I mean, it started out terrible, and I all but given up hope. But I don't want to give too much credit to Adam, but I think that trade did save my season.
Yes, I would like to take that back if I could, so I will be editing the rosters before our matchup this week.
Depending on what happens this weekend, Adam might never trade with me again.
That is very true. I don't like my chances, but we'll get to that later on in the show.
Well, before we get into the matchups of Week 15, maybe we should talk about the players that Adam still does actually have on his team that he did not trade away. He has managed to hold on to enough firepower. Of course, being the only team in the Beltway Wars Invitational to have a bye in Week 1 of the playoffs. So, Adam, on your bye week, I just quickly rounded some numbers and added them up. You had a starting lineup of 110 points that featured 2 zeros. So And then on the bench, you did have a 19-point performance from Joshua Palmer, Jerry Jeudy, 8 points. So generally, I would say, adding up all the totals, it kind of seems like a so-so week for you, maybe down from some of the higher point totals that you had, but you did get, a 20-point game from Amon-Ra, the sun god, Brown, St. Brown. You got 13-point performances from both running backs. Kyler, 13 points. We, of course, know that he will be barring a pickup here in this week. I mean, it looks like Kyler Murray will get the start for you. So what did you see coming through this bye week for you? What do you think of Tyreek Hill and his injury? And just what are your general thoughts about kind of your week off?
So what I would say is that I'm concerned about Kyler. He did have a tough matchup this week against San Fran, so that's good. Has a much easier matchup against Chicago this week, but it does look like it's going to be rainy. Hopefully that he can get his rushing attempts, maybe get a couple rushing touchdowns in. In terms of Tyreek, I'm glad he sat the last game. I think that's what Miami was kind of thinking. Just that it should have been an easy win when it turned out it was. He did come out for warm-ups, and they just decided he's a no-go. They're playing against Dallas this week. With them trying to catch up to the Ravens in terms of record, I can't see him not playing this game against Dallas on Sunday, Christmas Eve at 4:25. So I think he'll play. A kind of underlining concern that I do have is Dalton Kincaid. 0 points last week, which was kind of weird. Dawson Knox is back, and Dalton Kincaid only played 49% of the snaps. So that's kind of concerning to me. So I don't know if I'm going to go with Pat Freiermuth or not, because he has his own problems. But Dalton Kincaid's not that surefire lock to score me 10 points each week like he has been the last couple of weeks. So do have a lot of question marks, but just got to trust in my squad, I guess, and hope for the best.
Absolutely. Not all you can do at this point. Waiver wire thin at this point in the season, so you just got to hope that the guys that you're going to be riding with you're going to be dancing with the date that you brought to the dance. So all the guys that are there, Dalton Kincaid probably still a better bet than Pat Freiermuth, even with the reduced workload, but you will certainly have a decision to make there. So without further ado, let's get into those Week 15, the teams that were playing in Week 15, of which there were 6 playoff teams playing and 3 people advancing into the second round. So let's start off with the guy that's not here, Dustin Summers, and his Ocean Pines Octopi getting the win over Charlie and the Reisterstown Rockstars, 125-68 to 120-88. Just about a 5-point margin in this one. In fact, Dustin, worried about that scary prospect of a -4 from a kicker, decides to sit his kicker prior to, I guess it was the Monday night game. But just quickly looking at Dustin's team here that contributed to the 125-point total. Of course, those duo of running backs, Jahmyr Gibbs and Kyren Williams, each going for over 100 yards and scoring, a boatload of touchdowns. Jahmyr Gibbs had 2, Kyren Williams had 1, plus a 2-point conversion. 27 carries for Kyren Williams, really just continues to be one of the best, if not the best, late season running backs, of course, returning from injury a handful of weeks ago. He also gets an incredible performance from Jalen Waddle in the Miami Dolphins 30-0 win over the Jets. Waddle goes 8 for 9, 142 and 1 touchdown, really filling that role well while Tyreek Hill missed his first game of the season. Waddle definitely made up the difference there. Otherwise, some kind of disappointing performances from, Puka Nacua, 5 for 50 in this one. You hope that maybe when his volume was back up to 10, 11, 12 targets per game, now that Kupp is healthy and playing well, his targets certainly have gone down. Kyle Pitts, just 3 for 4 for 37 yards in the tight end spot. And then the guy, Adam, that you have been talking about as pivotal for Dustin in his playoff run is Marquise Brown, who puts up a goose egg in this game against the 49ers. So let me throw that to you, Adam, first, and then we'll work Jake in. But Marquise Brown, not a good game. And his record with Kyler Murray here these last couple weeks since Murray has returned has not been good. Do you see anybody on this bench that you would just immediately consider as a backup option to slide into that flex spot?
Well, I will say, just first off, it looks like Marquise Brown was hurt in this game. He only played 32% of snaps, so that could have been the reason why he had a goose egg there. Still like the player, but if he's hurt, obviously you can't play him. Looking at the bench here, I mean, what do you do? Jake Browning's playing better, so Tyler Boyd maybe has some value, but limited value with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase ahead of him. Gabe Davis maybe as like just a home run throw, and just hopefully he scores a long touchdown pass. That could be really the only option because I don't really see any other better options. Tyson Hill is kind of the home run throw. Like I said, Tyler Boyd, Cade Otton, you're not throwing that tight end in there. So it doesn't really have many options there in terms of the flex. And you don't really want to run Kyle Pitts and Cade Otton at the flex there. So if I had to pick one of these guys, I think it would be Gabe Davis, and just hopefully he scores a long touchdown pass or reception.
Yeah, and Gabe Davis has always been one of these high-risk, high-reward guys. Of course, Davis this week putting up his fourth 0-point game in his last 6. So that's like unheard of. And it's not like he's not playing. He's consistently 80 to 90% of the snaps. This week dipped down to 72, but yet another, there's a back-to-back 0-point game for Gabe Davis. The other interesting storyline that I want to hear Jake's take on here, all season, at least in the second half of the year, we've been talking about the quarterbacks for Dustin. At one point he had 3 or 4. At one point he illegally had 4 quarterbacks on his team that nobody caught, but had 3 for quite a while. Now has just 2. Of course, Sam Howell, the starter in this one, yet another kind of a struggle game for him. He's had hasn't been 20 points since week 10, so it's been 4 straight weeks under 20 fantasy points. And then you've got Baker Mayfield, who put up 29 points on Dustin's bench. He has had back-to-back 20-point games. So looking ahead, Jake, Dustin's got a decision here. He's got Sam Howell with the Commanders up against the Jets, that stingy defense in the Jets. And he's got Baker Mayfield with potentially a plus matchup that Lamar Jackson just carved up, the Jacksonville Jaguars. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, with both these guys, you got to, I think, generally to play the matchups, but I don't know. With the way Baker Mayfield's been playing, he has a hotter hand, and I think he'll continue that against the Jags. I mean, I know the Jets have that stingy defense, and that would probably one of the biggest factors that make me consider not starting Howell. But I think you got to go Mayfield right now.
For sure. Adam, what do you think? I see you're nodding your head. I don't want to give Dustin, he's not going to listen, but I don't want to give Dustin too much free fantasy advice here from the experts. But what do you think? Howell versus Mayfield in week 16?
So we got Mayfield versus Jacksonville. Mayfield's now number 15. Sam Howell against the Jets, number 7 on the season. Just to be different, give me the Howell. Just because... hard defense, I agree. But I do think that this is going to be a close game. I do think that they're not going to be able to run the ball at all. So I do think he's going to have to throw. I just think there's a little more safety in terms of Howell, where I feel like Baker Mayfield could throw 3 picks, and it'd be really bad. I don't really foresee that with Howell. They did bench him in this game, which was kind of weird, in what was a pretty close game. But... as of 2 days ago, they say will remain the starter, so I don't think that's going to happen again. I don't think he's going to even play that bad going forward. So give me Howell just a little bit over Mayfield.
Okay. Well, and then I guess to wrap up this game, I did sort of bury the lead a little bit, and the biggest story, I think, for Dustin's team, aside from those kind of positional decisions that he has to make, not only will he need to start a flex we already talked about the lack of options on this team, but Jamar Chase, his number 1 elite wide receiver, leaves this game, and right now it seems like, I don't know, reading the tea leaves, he's not practicing Tuesday. It kind of feels like he's probably on the doubtful side of questionable on this one. I mean, Jake, how big of a loss would that be, do you think, for this team? I mean, Jamar Chase, to not be able to slide him in the lineup, do you see him being able to sort of escape that and come away with a win against me next week?
I mean, normally it's a huge loss. I mean, this year has been so up and down with Jamar Chase in the beginning of the season with Burrow's injuries and troubles early on, and then again now that Burrow is out and Browning is in. Browning's played well, but he hasn't been getting the ball to Chase as much as you would expect. I mean, based on what I'm seeing, I don't think Chase will be in, and I think that hurts him mostly because he'll have to start Boyd, I think, in his place, and then he'll be scrambling to put someone in, in his flex, and may need to try to start someone like Taysom Hill.
Yeah, that is right. The guy we've talked about on the pod many times, his ability to score in bunches is well documented. Of course, Jimmy Graham, Fantasy Zombie, has come out of nowhere and taken a few of those touchdowns as of late. Right? He is with the Saints, I think. Is that Jimmy Graham?
Yeah, Jimmy Graham is with the Saints. Throwback.
Yeah.
Yeah, he just had a touchdown again last weekend.
Fantasy Zombie. Yep, absolutely. All right. I don't want to spend too much time on each one of these, and we won't devote as much attention, sorry, Charlie, to your team. But before we move off of Dustin's team, Adam, anything else on this team that you sort of see as kind of being of note as he takes this one and moves on to the semifinals?
Yeah, Puka Nacua, not really impressive this week, not playing this top, 15 performance that he has been, earlier in the season. Still wide receiver 10. But, going down from 21 to 11 to 7 as Cooper Kupp gets more and more involved back into this offense, just might not see the ceiling that we've been seeing for Puka Nacua in these last 2 weeks of the fantasy playoffs.
For sure. All right. Well, moving on over to the losing side of this one, Charlie finishes his regular season 7-7 and with a loss in the playoffs to begin the round one games last week. He gets a breakout performance from James Cook, a guy who's been really good lately. He goes 25 carries for 179 yards and a touchdown, also scores a touchdown through the air, contributing to a 35-point fantasy day, making Dustin one of the few teams to escape James Cook's wrath in round one of the playoffs. Probably very few people that went up against Cook and could say they were victorious. Does get some nice performances here from Demarcus Robinson, a guy we talked about last week on the pod as kind of a nice little pickup in a game that you figure the Rams would be able to throw against the Commanders. He goes 2 for 3, 44 yards and a touchdown, adds on a 23-yard carry. So not a lot of volume, but does get the touchdown for 13 fantasy points. Jacoby Myers, similarly, not terribly involved, just 2 for 4, 32 yards and a touchdown. But just as the trend we just talked about with Robinson, he gets involved in kind of a couple end arounds and goes 2 for 2. I'm sorry, that's throwing. He was 2 for 2 throwing. He threw a touchdown in this game. So I assume that was a running back touchdown, but it is indeed a passing touchdown. Otherwise, not a lot to note. It was kind of those couple big performances. Patrick Mahomes continues to fail to return the fantasy value that you drafted him at. He now has 3 straight games under 16 fantasy points and really doesn't have one of those classic Mahomes 30-point games since week 7. So tough luck here for Charlie exiting the playoffs. And Derrick Henry really struggles here as well. 16 carries for 9 yards. So tough sledding. Adam, anything you want to say to wrap up the season here for Charlie?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that was a good season for Charlie based on some of the negative returns he got on some of these players. Made some savvy moves. Having Jacoby Myers really worked out for him, but Patrick Mahomes, just real disappointment in the first round. His quarterback number 6 in the first round. That is nothing good there. Demarcus Robinson, that was a nice late season pickup return for him this week. 3 straight games of over 10 points. So going on Charlie there for seeing that. Like I said, Jacoby Myers, I don't know if he even drafted him, but let's take a peek.
He did, 12th round, yep.
Yeah, so of course my computer is going to crash here, or at least the website's going to crash, so that's great. Too many people trying to get on. It's fine. All right, we're back.
So, Jake, what do you think?
Just to close it out, did a lot and got pretty far with, a lot of question marks at a lot of different positions. So good on Charlie for getting this far. The injury really to Keenan Allen really crushed his season, though. Not having him and with Justin Herbert being out was kind of the death nail for Keenan Allen and Charlie's squad.
Absolutely, it was. I want to stick on Pat Mahomes for just a second and see what Jake. So Jake took a quarterback in the 5th round. Of course, Justin Herbert, who it's now lore that that midseason trade, Herbert going to your team and getting hurt last week. But Jake, you waited to kind of get one of those middle top tier quarterbacks in Herbert, whereas Charlie kind of sprung for Mahomes. What'd you think of that pick? And, he went 10th overall. Is that a pick that you would ever make if you had one of those kind of end of first round kind of pick numbers?
Yeah, I typically avoid trying to take a quarterback that, especially in the first round. I mean, often your number one guy is based off of how they did last year, and generally it's been the quarterback that was the top scorer for that year rarely has followed up the next season with a equivalent point total. So it's just tough. I always try to look for value later, try to get a mid-round guy and hope that he does better than, the position that I drafted him in. Sometimes if it aligns, I'll take a top-tier guy in the 2nd or 3rd round. But it's tough to take a quarterback in the 1st round, especially, you're chancing so much if he doesn't do well, even if he's middle of the road.
Yeah, for sure. And at the end of the day, Charlie needed him, I think, to play like the draft value that he drafted him at to kind of go make a run here in the playoffs. It wasn't in the cards for Mahomes and Charlie this season, so we bid Charlie farewell. Moving on to the next matchup, I think we're going to go to my matchup, my Calypso Blue Crabs against Brian Morgan's Timonium Thundercats. Also, like Charlie, Brian ending his season in the 1st round with a 7-7 record in the regular season. For my team, Matt Stafford gets the starting quarterback over Tua. That turned out to be the right decision. Neither guy had 20-point games, but Stafford put up a solid 18. Ty Chandler, in his spot start for Alexander Madison, has a huge game to sort of kick off the scoring for my team in a big way in that Thursday. I believe that was the Thursday game. 23 carries, 132 yards, and a rushing touchdown. It may have been like the first rushing touchdown of the season for the Vikings, or it may be their second. And I think Chandler may have had both of them because Madison, I don't believe, had any. So a really nice game there. Barkley, rough one against a very good New Orleans defense that held him to 14 yards on the ground. CeeDee Lamb gets into the end zone, 7 for 10, typical CeeDee Lamb things. Down game for Ridley against very tough Baltimore defense. Metcalf was very bad until basically the last drive of that game where he earned the majority of his 10 fantasy points. Hawkinson, solid. Aaron Jones making his long-awaited return. In the flex spot here, 13 carries for 53 yards, but 4 for 4 from through the air in this one. This is with, of course, Dylan, his Packers backfield mate, missing this game. Matt Gay, 13 fantasy points from the kicker position, and the 49ers, 11 points. So I'm pretty happy with it. We talked a lot about this last week, the quarterback kind of choices between Stafford and Tua. But Adam, what are your kind of instant reactions to kind of the way my team played in Week 15?
Team looked good, I would say. Even with Saquon Barkley only getting less than 5 points, still had a pretty decent victory of 17 points. You were correct with starting Matthew Stafford over Tua, so 1 for 1 on that decision, scoring over, 5 points? 6 points over what Tua did, Stafford. So good on you there. Underrated pickup. Ty Chandler, 23 carries, 132 yards, and a touchdown with Alexander Madison being out of this game. Be interesting to see how his role continues. He had 81% of the snap count. If he remains sidelined, I think you have to keep him in the lineup. So good little sneaky pickup for you there. Could have even been a bigger game for you if Calvin Ridley would have scored that touchdown in what should have been a touchdown against Baltimore. But 12 targets, you like to see that with Christian Kirk now being out. You're kind of seeing how that Jacksonville offense is showing out. So 12 targets, you love to see that. Aaron Jones, 13 carries, 53 yards. Probably still a little bit hurt. But, you know, you're just hoping for more than 13 carries and 48% snap count. So that'll be interesting to see. You have an interesting decision next week. He plays Carolina. Probably have to get him in the lineup against that horrible defense. And you have 3 quarterbacks, so it'll be interesting to see how or who you pick up from the free agency market. Last thing I will say, James Conner looked good. 14 carries, 86 yards against a tough defense, 16 points. So you kind of have a logjam here at running back, and you have to kind of figure out who you want to plug and play for your best result.
Yes, absolutely, I will. And I'm going to take this opportunity to ask both of you about it because you play each other. You don't play me. I do have a decision to make. You know, you mentioned that if Ty Chandler has that lead role again, if Madison is ruled out for a second week in a row, dare I give Chandler another opportunity, benching a guy like Aaron Jones or James Conner or Saquon Barkley? Barkley, coming off of a difficult matchup, has a Philadelphia defense that has been very good against the run this season, less so as of late. You've got James Conner in a plus matchup against the Bears. So that defense has continued to get better throughout the season. You've got Aaron Jones in probably the best matchup for a running back against the Carolina Panthers. And you've got Ty Chandler against the number 1 ranked Detroit Lions rushing defense. So, Jake, what do you think, man? I've been texting both of you all week about other leagues, the last 2 weeks, about decisions that I've had to make. So how about this decision? What do you think of these running backs? And pick 3 of 4.
Yeah, I mean, Chandler, he had a great game for you, and he helped you get the win. But he made your decision tough this week because now he's got, he's added himself to the equation with Connor, who's had, I think he was on bye last week, but he's had his past 2 games, he's been over 15 points. And Barkley has a bad game this week, but I find it difficult to sit him, even with that 4-point stat. So, I think you start Barkley, and a little bit of bias here, but Aaron Jones, I think, is only going to get better. That game got away from the Packers. They started throwing the ball as they got down more, and they didn't use Aaron Jones as much in the passing game. And I think that probably is partially from his injury too. So, I feel better about Aaron Jones. I mean, that first drive, he looked great. He had 40-something yards in that first drive of the game. I would go Aaron Jones and Barkley, and then that last spot, that one's tough. Connor had a tough matchup last week against San Francisco, and now he plays the Bears. So you'd think that, feel a little better about him playing against the Bears. But Ty Chandler, if he's the only one, getting carries, it'll be difficult to say no after the week that he had. So I had to pick one. I'm probably taking Chandler just because of the matchup against the Lions. I think that game will be a little closer than people expect, and that the Vikings will be able to run the ball. I probably go Chandler on that one.
Okay, sit Connor, says Jake. Adam, concur?
My is going to be between either Aaron Jones or James Conner. Now, James Conner, Arizona they're at Chicago. It looks like it's going to be a rainy day there in Chicago, so could be more of a ground attack there. And then, obviously, we just talked about Aaron Jones playing against Carolina. If I had to guess which one I'd want to go with, I'd probably go Jones just based on the matchup with A.J. Dillon being out, I'm not sure if he's out for the year, but he's out, especially if he's out. Just with the plus matchup and the talent that he has, Aaron Jones can easily score 3 touchdowns and send you into the next round of the playoffs.
So wait, let me make sure I understand. You're saying start Jones, Connor, and Barkley, and sit Chandler?
No, start Chandler. I would say you only start Chandler if Madsen's out.
If Madison, sure, absolutely.
Yeah, but if he's out and
okay.
you're getting 23 carries out of him, you got to start him.
So if Madison's out, you sit Connor.
Correct.
Okay. Would let me add this to both of you. Would if Jones and Dillon both play, does that change anything for you for Jones?
Probably. With running backs in terms of me, I always like to go with the guy that's going to get most of the carries, if not all the carries. So I would probably go with James Conner at that point. Just because I feel like this Carolinas game is going to get out of hand. And they might spread the ball around where, as in Arizona, James Conner is the only guy there that's worth his salt, and he looked good last week. I watched a little bit of that game, so.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still probably taking Jones, and in that one, just Dillon has that broken thumb, and Jones are trying to. I think they're probably trying to work him back in, and trying to make a playoff run here.
Got it. I was skipping you because I knew you would pick Jones, because that's your boy. That's your boy. You have to pick him. Yeah, very interesting decisions. Then that's not to even speak of the Tua Stafford decision, which I won't solicit opinions on. I think I'm going to start Tua. I may change my mind about that 10 times before the start of this next week. But let's move over very quickly to wrapping it up for the season for Brian. Solid effort this season, overcame some injuries, does end up starting Brock Purdy once the news came out that Jalen Hurts was in danger of potentially missing this game with an illness. Purdy does end up outperforming Hurts by 3 or 4 points, so ends up being the right decision there. It was really these running backs that totally let Brian down in the most important week of his season. Breece Hall, he of 2.0 yards per carry every week does just that. 6 for 12 in an ugly loss that they were down big against the Dolphins. Javonte Williams, 12 for 27, not that much better than 2 yards a carry. Not too involved in the passing game, 2 for 2, but -7 on the yards there in the passing game. So really a huge disappointment. Same can be said, I think, of Devontae Smith. 5 for 5 for 50. He needed a big game out of him on Monday night to have a shot at this one. He does not quite get it. Demario Douglas returning from injury for the Patriots, just 3 for 5, 33 yards. Terry McLaurin, a nice bounce-back game, a little bit too little, too late for Brian. Has his best game of the season here, 23 fantasy points, targeted 12 times, scores in this one, as does Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the flex position, 13 for 37, involved through the air for 64 yards and a touchdown. So some nice performances on here, but those running backs really, really let this team down. Ended up making probably the correct decisions in all of the start-sits in this one. But Adam, what do you make of this week for Brian and his season ending in round 1?
Again, someone that struggled at the beginning of the season. Really was let down this week by his running backs, Breece Hall, who's a popular point of contention here. Not a great day again. Basically the end of the season, 6 for 12. Javonte Williams, after having a little bit of life there in the middle of the season, also a disappointing day. Got really nothing out of these wide receivers. Devontae Smith, Demario Douglas, nothing really other. Terry McLaurin did have a nice day. But then again, what we were talking about all season, Travis Kelce, not living up to expectations, was selected 2 overall. Now is the number 57th overall player, so just not enough bang for his buck. Does go with Brock Purdy, and he scored over 4 more points than Jalen Hurts. So good decision there, but not enough to advance themselves to the playoffs, and just, again, really let down by his top two running backs, who he's expecting to get a lot more when he drafted them at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think you bring up a good point in Travis Kelce, a guy that we've kind of said, as we've been talking about Mahomes, we've almost been talking about Kelce a little bit in that same light, that Mahomes we're used to those 30-point games, and Travis Kelce, we're used to those 20-point games, but those averages are way down this year for both players. And this struggle, 5 for 7, was tight end 24 this week. And this was with Taylor Swift in the house. So that whole rumor, that whole theory that I had about, Taylor being in the house, him overperforming, really suffers in that narrative, does not work in this one. Jake, next year, I asked you earlier about Mahomes and kind of drafting quarterbacks. How about tight end? So he goes number 2 overall, which was something that Adam has talked about many times, to Brian. We had Brian on the show explaining himself for that pick, but where are you taking Travis Kelce next year, Jake, based on this season's currently third? He's the third tight end in fantasy scoring.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly wouldn't take him in the first round next year. I think he'll bounce back. I think, he's having an off year. I wouldn't be, too nervous about picking him next year, but I certainly couldn't see him picking him higher than the second round, and maybe late second round. I often wait for tight ends too, and sometimes that doesn't work out for me. But Travis Kelce is still going to be a top tier tight end next year. I'm not too concerned. Maybe just I wouldn't take him in the first round.
Yep, I hear you for sure. I hear you. So okay, well that I think will do it for Brian's season and our recap of this game. He exits in round 1 in 2023. Next, we will move on to the final matchup of the week, and that is Jacob Krieger's Cumberland Countryman. Lots of alliteration going on there. Gets the win over Mike Kranz and the Columbia Creep Show. Lots of C's in this matchup, but Jake, your team played like an A, 124.86 fantasy points this week. And it wasn't because of Dak Prescott. We've been so used to these dominant performances from Prescott, from Evans, the two guys that you acquired midseason. Of course, we get the mega dud last week from Evans, and then we get the, I would say, a mega dud for Dak Prescott this week. Just 21 for 34, no touchdowns, and 1 interception. He just goes for 6 points, but that didn't matter too much when you've got Christian McCaffrey making up more than his share. 18 carries, 115 yards, and a touchdown on the ground. Yet another 72 yards on 5 receptions, and 2 more touchdowns through the air for a 39.2 fantasy point performance in Week 15. More double-digit scores for you. Rachaad White continues to be phenomenal. I'm really curious. When I throw this to you, I really want you to tell me what you thought of his fantasy season, because he has certainly been one of the biggest surprises. Mike Evans, 13 fantasy points, and my app froze. So I'm going to throw it to you. What do you make of Week 15 for your team?
Yeah, I mean, had some really top scoring. It started out, pretty hot. Moss got that touchdown early, and the Colts defense played well. And then when Moss got hurt and some of the other games started, I got a little nervous with the Pack game. But Rachaad White really, he has continued his just dominant performance. And kind of after those middle of the afternoon games, I felt not, comfortable, but after the Miami game and Achane didn't go off, I started to feel a little better. White has just been, beginning of the season, I drafted him because I needed a running back, and I felt, he'd be middle of the road. Halfway through the season, I almost traded him. I was after the trade with Adam. I was looking to try and just bolster my team a little bit more, and nearly traded him. I ended up, I forget who it was too, but we played that week, and so we waited. And I ended up just keeping him, and that's when he turned his kind of season around. I've just been, going crazy. So certainly happy I kept him and ended up not trading him away, and happy with where his season, is right now. Need a little more out of the Packers this week.
Definitely need a little bit out of the Packers. You also need some of your injured players to come back. Chris Olave being ruled out in this week, did not play in week 15, nor did Christian Watson. His absence continues on now to its fourth. That was his third week out. So potentially two guys that may return, which could help given the fact that Odell Beckham really struggled here. Romeo Dobbs wasn't able to take advantage of the larger workload with Watson remaining out. And Zach Moss, 4 carries for 13 yards. He does score in this one, but I think he left with injury, and I think it's a hand injury. His status uncertain as of this point. He's optimistic about playing, so we will see if that translates into points in the second round of the playoffs. But Adam, anything? This is your opponent next week, right? So what did you see in this week 15 matchup here that kind of makes you say, shit, I got to really watch out for this guy?
Well, I think the obvious one is Christian McCaffrey, number 1 overall player, fantasy football, 39 points, number 1 running back, number 3 overall. Does get Baltimore this week, so I did think I get kind of lucky there. Baltimore has a good defense, and of course he'll be a point of emphasis, I think, in their defensive game plan. So hopefully I don't lose to Jake, and also we lose to the 49ers, so hopefully they have a good plan for McCaffrey. Rachaad White, I would say, just continues just to be a carry monster. 21 carries. I mean, he's a lock to get over 21 carries each and every week. Of course, the app freezes again. I don't know what they are doing, but continues to get over that many amount of carries each week. Is really, really scary, I will say. Each one of those carries could be a red zone carry. He is involved in the passing game a lot too. 50 yards this week. Mike Evans, of course, another 1,000-yard season, another touchdown. I wish I had him on my team as my number 3. But then again, Jake does have some issues here, right? So Chris Olave, is he healthy? Is he going to come back? Odell Beckham doesn't really show anything in this. Romeo Dobbs, is Christian Watson going to be back? Zach Moss out of this game. Is he going to be back? So very interesting there to see what will happen in terms of those players. And I did like to see that Dak Prescott only scored 6 points because I traded him to Jake. So hopefully sign of things to come for this week against me.
Yep, absolutely. And before we kind of move over to the losing side here, Jake, is there what do you think will be the key to this team continuing on making the championship? Is there any one player, one spot on this roster that you look at and you say, I really need this to work in order to get on to the next round?
Yeah, I mean, I think I need Christian Watson to come back. My receivers have been my struggle, and Mike Evans kind of, shored me up after that trade. But now with Olave, potentially going down, Dobbs and Beckham are just inconsistent. I think my flex spot, I'll look at Harris or Moss or try to get someone else in there to try to fill between those two, try to get enough points out of flex. But I need a consistent, that third receiver. I'm not too concerned about Dak.
Yeah, and Dak, we'll get into it next, but some of your key players do have some decent matchups next week as well. All right, Jake, well, let's move on to the team that you beat this week, which is Mike's Columbia Creep Show. I'm trying to find the matchup here. Just 86.16 points in this one. Take us through kind of his lineup and kind of give us a recap and tell us kind of what you were thinking throughout the week, and was there any guys that kind of surprised you, or they played well and you were worried, or they played poorly and you kind of feel like I got this in the bag? Any of those moments this week for you?
Yeah, I mean, his team generally is just underperformances from all of his big guys. I mean, Allen only 16 points. I mean, they ran away with that game with Cook. They just ran the ball, and Allen didn't need to throw. ETN just knew much on the ground, only 31 yards, 7.9 points. He his points have always stemmed off of touchdowns, and you always get 1 or 2 touchdowns, and that's where his points come from. Elliott, you would have hoped he would have done better. I think Stevenson was out. Moore only 7.2. Jefferson, who came back, had a decent game, 11.9. 10 targets, 7 receptions. Just, didn't get in the end zone. Dalton Schultz came back, 7.8 points. Achane, back in the game, looked decent at times. He had a big run called back for 20 yards or something. So, he was definitely in there and involved, and just to end up with 7.7 point on that end. At 6.3, and then the Falcons had a decent game with 9 points. He got some of these guys back, all those injury concerns that you guys talked about last week. He ended up having everyone in except for Brian Robinson, who he may not have started anyway over, the 3 running backs that he did. And, they just couldn't capitalize. They couldn't, no one could get in the end zone. Just underperformance is all around from all the guys that he's been waiting for all season to come back. So it's tough.
100%. I mean, I think that is the key, and it's something Adam and I talk about every week. And I'm curious what Adam thinks of this. I mean, my theory here on this terrible week, I mean, he only gets double-digit performances out of 2 players, Justin Jefferson being one and Josh Allen being the other. Of course, 16 points for a quarterback, not what you need to see from your fantasy elite starting quarterback in fantasy. But do you think that this timeline of kind of Jefferson and Achane maybe being kind of a week or 2 behind, the fact that now Mike had to start the playoffs relying on these guys that have been hurt to kind of come back and very quickly get back up to speed, do you think ultimately that is really the story here, that those 2 guys just couldn't quite kick it back up to 110 when they needed to?
Yeah, I mean, just looking at his squad, I mean, one of the more talented squads, I'd say like top 3 talent squads in the Beltway Wars Invitational. Josh Allen, close to the number 1, is the number 1 overall player in fantasy football. Justin Jefferson, number 1 overall pick. Devin Achane, kind of an unknown at the beginning of the season, but really showed out, was hampered by a knee injury, really hurt him. Even his trade acquisition, Brian Robinson, out of this game. So really just injuries tell the tale for Mike's team. Super talented team. Could have made it really far, but injuries really stopped him from his team's full potential.
Absolutely, it did. And I should also mention that, Jefferson and Achane aren't the only 2 really guys returning from week or multiple week absences. Dalton Schultz returned in this one without all the familiar weapons that were there when he got hurt. You had no C.J. Stroud, you had no Nico Collins, you had no Tank Dell. A lot of heat, a lot of pressure was on Dalton Schultz. He doesn't come through in this one, and neither does Rashid Shaheed in his first game back from an injury. In a plus matchup against the Giants, he goes just 3 for 4 for 36 yards. So I don't know, guys. Anything else just on this team before we close it out for Mike? Tough year. It's a tough way to end it after such a hot start. He also finishes 7-7.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say this team was probably the most disappointing just based on how much talent there was. He just couldn't put it together. Not anything on his end, but just in terms of injuries. Really want this one back and his team fully healthy just to see how far they could go.
For sure. Well, with that, let's now kind of move into the second half of the show, and this will be a little bit quicker. I just wanted to take a look at the playoff matchups, and I'm actually kind of curious if Sleeper is going to let me do that because the playoff point scores do not get finalized until, I believe, 2 a.m. This coming tonight. They don't actually let you get to the matchups. Have you found a way around this, Adam, that we can sort of preview these? Or are we going to have to kind of do it the old-fashioned way and just look at the teams from their last matchup?
Look at the teams, probably.
All right. Well, let's start. Let's start with the matchup between the both of you, the Countrymen versus the Bay Sharks. Bay Sharks.
Yep.
Bay Sharks. Okay. So we talked a little bit about your team, Adam. Tyreek Hill, let's start. Are you feeling good? You think, you said earlier, you think he'll probably be back. How certain are you at this point? And what would it mean if he, for some reason, misses this game in a pivotal semifinal matchup?
Well, basically, I think it means that my season's over if he misses this one. My team is not talented enough to be without him, especially in this pivotal matchup against a strong team like Jake's. So it's really, if he's walking and he's active, he's in for me. Start your studs, as they say. Really hoping he plays. If not, I mean, it could be Jerry Jeudy or Joshua Palmer. Who's filling in that role, and that is not a downgrade that you want in the fantasy playoffs.
For sure, that is very true. Before I want to get Jake's take, but before we get to that, let's do this. You've talked a lot about the X factor for certain teams throughout the season, and Marquise Brown, that was the pivotal X factor for Dustin a week or two ago. What do you see? Who's your X factor here? Taking out the Tyreek Hill question mark, but is there something that you just really need somebody to step up and win this one for you?
Yeah, I mean, I would say Alvin Kamara is probably the second guy here that I need. Something like 8 catches on 12 targets, maybe a couple of touchdowns. A throwback to a couple years ago where he scored 7 touchdowns would be kind of nice. Here, Al Kamara, Rasheed Mostert, that would be nice if you can get another 20-point game. So really, those two players are the 2 players I'm really looking at to really carry the load if Tyreek is out or even if he is in. So those 2 players are the players that I'm looking for.
Got it. Any lineup decisions that are going to be crucial for you here? Just looking, I mean, we talked about the quarterback situation earlier with Kincaid versus Freiermuth. You got Josh Palmer in his, his first game back in quite a while since week 8. With the backup quarterback, does go 4 for 4, 113 and a touch. Any way that you would consider getting a guy like him in there for a Deontay Johnson, or is your starting lineup pretty much set?
There's a question between Deontay Johnson and Joshua Palmer just because now the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to Mason Rudolph, their 3rd starting quarterback of the season. What's his chemistry going to be like with Deontay Johnson? I did like him with Mitch Trubisky. I don't know. Mason Rudolph is kind of an unknown for me. Going to see what the fantasy experts say on that, but I would say that Johnson and Palmer and also Kincaid versus Freiermuth is in the conversation, especially with Kincaid questionable, remains limited. Just have to kind of see the practice reports and see what the rankings are between Freiermuth or Kincaid.
Got it. All right. So just a couple decisions there for you to make. Let's move over and check out Jake's team here. Jake, you may have some decisions. We talked about a little bit earlier. We talked about Christian Watson, that you think he is kind of your X factor here in needing to get back. And of course, when he was playing just a mere few weeks ago, had a 17-point day and a 24-point day as the Packers and Jordan Love have sort of gotten better. Their offense has improved as the season has gone on. They certainly have many options involved in the passing attack. Let's assume for a second that Zach Moss is out. He's optimistic he'll play, but for the sake of this, let's assume he's out. Let's assume that Chris Olave misses another game. I don't know his status right now. I don't know that we have too much indication this early in the week. He had a limited walkthrough Tuesday. Who are you looking to potentially insert? Is there anybody on your bench that you kind of feel good about? Najee Harris, can you really trust him at this point after a really terrible game? Who's your kind of best next hope on the bench?
Yeah, it'll probably be Harris filling in on the flex spot. It's been decision between Harris and Moss the past 2 weeks, and I've gone with Moss, and that's, they've been relatively the same except for this past week. But I think Harris, has the opportunity to bounce back. He gets those red zone runs, and has potential to get in the end zone. Receiver, it's going to really hurt because Beckham, Brandon Cooks, Romeo Dobbs, they've all been hit or miss. Beckham, he'll go off and have that long touchdown catch, but then the next week, have 1.9 points. So it's really tough, and it's hard to even play him based off of matchups because he's really stunk in some good matchups. And Cooks, again, inconsistent. He had a couple weeks where he was really good, and then a couple weeks where he's non-existent. So it'll be a tough decision between Beckham and Cooks and Dobbs if I have to insert one of them. And the only good thing for me is that Chris Olave plays on Thursday, so I'll hopefully know that a little sooner. And,
you'll know.
We'll be able to make my decision then.
Much better than a Sunday night game or a Monday night game. We should say also Zach Moss. What time does he play? He's your other kind of guy that you'd love to know.
Sunday.
1:00 Sunday, so not too bad there. And we would be remiss without talking about this the storyline that we mentioned last week. Of course, we've alluded to it here tonight. The trade that sent Dak Prescott and Mike Evans from Adam's team to Jake's team in the middle part of the year. It really marked a flashpoint for Jake, a turning point for his season, struggling prior to that and coming out of that looking very good. Those two guys have been huge in the second half of the season for you. And Adam, Herbert is now lost for the year. And remind me the other player that was involved in that deal.
That'd be Dak Prescott, Mike Evans, Justin Herbert, and Jared Jeudy.
And Jerry Jeudy, who missed some time and has been generally underwhelming. How are you feeling about these guys now, Adam, with Prescott and Evans? Prescott going up against the Miami Dolphins. Do you think that that's going to be more of a high-scoring game, low-scoring game? I mean, both really good offenses and both at times very, very good defenses. And Mike Evans, of course, has been a little bit hit or miss. Well, he's been mostly hit aside from the Atlanta matchup in Week 14. He gets Jacksonville, a team that we just saw against our Ravens a night or two ago. What do you think of those two guys? Are you worried? Which one are you more worried about moving into this matchup here?
I'm probably more worried about Mike Evans. I could foresee him, having a big game in terms of, just how talented he is. He's really the guy that Baker Mayfield looks forward to the most. If the app would stop crashing, that'd be great because it keeps on crashing. So, you said that the Bucs play Jacksonville? Is that what you said?
Yep.
Okay, yeah. So, it's just one of those things where, if you have a wide receiver go off, I would say it hurts more than the quarterback. The quarterback's expected always to get around 20 points. If it scores 30, it's not that big a deal. But if you have a wide receiver that's projected 12 and then hits 30, it's a lot more damage to your odds of victory. So I'm more worried about Mike Evans. And Dak Prescott does play differently on the road. His numbers kind of reflect that, where he scores lower amount of points when he's on the road, and he's on the road against Miami. So that's a very interesting matchup to see this week, and might determine our fantasy football results.
I think that's very possible that it does. And then just to close it out, we'll ask Jake the same question. Who are you more worried about, Herbert or Jerry Jeudy in Week 16? I'm only joking. You don't have to answer that question.
It might playing. Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. But anyway, I think that about covers it. I don't know what the projections are. I guess we'll know what they are when they finalize the Week 15 matchups. But any last thoughts from either of you? Any fantasy karma attempts? Any trash talking? Anything like that for either of you gentlemen?
I'll just say, I think it'll be a close and good matchup. I think, it could be pretty high scoring. Hopefully on my end for sure. And I need I don't know if you saw Christian McCaffrey's little Christmas outfit, but I need my little elf, to go all crazy.
Yeah, I mean,
I did not see that.
Yeah, I think that it's going to be a good matchup, and that the winner of this could very easily win the championship. So, for sure. I think it'll be a good matchup.
Very good. All right. Well, moving on to the other semifinal matchup that'll close us out for the evening is my Calypso Blue Crabs against Dustin Summers' Ocean Pines Octopi. A battle that Adam knows full well that I have fought and lost in over the years many times, many more times than I've won for some reason. Dustin always seems to pull out a victory against me. I believe he did so earlier this season. And I don't know, like it's going to be an interesting battle. We've both got quarterback questions, quarterback decisions to make. Dustin has had the great running back play of Gibbs and Williams compared to kind of some lackluster, injury-plagued Connor, Jones, Barkley concerns. So definitely youth versus experience in the running back battles coming up. The fact that Jamar Chase could miss this game, I think, probably has to factor in quite a bit into maybe how this matchup might be projected, at least from the start. And then, to me, Dustin's got to get that flex spot figured out. Marquise Brown, I don't think you can trust him, but there's not a whole lot on the bench. Certainly hoping that you get Jonathan Taylor back. I would say he's probably on the more doubtful side of questionable, but we will see. And even if he does play, is he healthy enough? Is he going to be kind of have a limited workload? Given Moss is there if he plays, given that Trey Sermon came in and did a good job, there's another running back there. So there's lots of options. But what's your first take, Adam, on sort of this matchup and any storylines that we should be kind of looking at or things that could shift into one person's favor over the other?
Well, I think then for you, I think it all comes down to the back end of your receivers, Calvin Ridley, DK Metcalf. If they can really show up, I think that will really be in your favor, especially if one of these running backs falters, Saquon, Chandler, or Aaron Jones. They can really pick up the slack. And both of those players, Calvin Ridley and DK Metcalf, have the possibility of really blowing up. They have that capacity. So good news for you. In terms of Dustin's team, it's all a story about the free agent acquisitions. Kyron Williams and Puka Nacua, can they put up enough together to really make a difference? And what is he going to do at that flex spot? I know we talked about it. Marquise Brown is a candidate for IR, apparently. So if he's not able to play, who does he throw in? Gabe Davis. It could come down to Gabe Davis. Can he score, a 70-yard touchdown pass, have one of those signature games that he does have? So in terms of the matchup, I would say that, Pat, your decisions are more for sure of who you're going to play, whereas Dustin has a lot of decisions to make in terms of that flex position.
Jake, you agree?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you have more players that their floor is a little higher, whereas Dustin, he really has to. I mean, he's really relying on his free agency pickups almost to score a lot of points for him to make up for the lack of play that he's going to have potentially in his other positions.
Yeah, I think that's certainly true. And speaking of those other positions, I mean, let's just look at those running backs for a second. Jahmyr Gibbs, Kyron Williams. So Kyron Williams, I guess we should actually talk about this. So Thursday night is the Rams game. The Rams taking on the New Orleans Saints, a team that has had a better defense in the earlier part of the season. Their defense has gotten worse as the season has gone on. I think they're still pretty solid, but a lot will come down to Thursday night football tomorrow. Today's Tuesday. 2 nights from now, we will have the Rams on television for all to see. Any X factors or keys, guys, that you're interested in kind of seeing how they'll perform? Tyreek Hill, did we get you both on record? Like, is that a guy that you think you should try to get in for the upside alone? Is there any consideration of Cade Otton instead of Kyle Pitts? Like, anybody here that you think is kind of an interesting play?
Tyson Hill, not Tyreek, because unless I didn't trade him.
For sure starting Tyreek.
Oh, did I see Tyreek Hill? Okay. Tyson Hill, thank you.
I mean,
They're brothers,
Brothers from another mother.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, that Atlanta offense, we've been talking about it all year. It's so bad. Like, you don't know if he's going to have 120 yards or 10 yards. You're already probably taking risks at the flex position, so do you want more risk at the tight end? I don't know. But there's not really better options. I mean, K. Dotton and Tyson Hill, I mean, they're all risks. But, yeah, I think you're rolling with Pitts, and then, you're throwing in a Hail Mary there at the flex position.
Yeah, on the season, Taysom Hill actually, by the numbers, the number 11 tight end, Pitts number 14, Otten right behind him at number 15. Yeah, I don't know. I'm cautiously optimistic about this one. I have it in my head that I lose to Dustin, so it would be a pleasant surprise to win. I think for that fact alone, I feel like the underdog. This is not a play for fantasy karma by saying any of this at all by any stretch of the imagination. And then I guess I will get your take. I'd be remiss if I didn't, because I said I wasn't going to ask you earlier, but Stafford, Mariota, just kidding, or Tua Tagovailoa in Week 16.
I feel like this is just turning into a Pat therapy session, trying to figure out who needs to play.
I mean, like I said, I feel pretty confident in Tua, so I can't say how much you would change my mind on any of this. He did have a better than expected day. I think he only had 12 fantasy points, but he did find Waddle for a long touchdown. He's going to get Tyreek Hill back. The matchup is decent, but not great. It's that Dallas defense who has been, I think, giving up more than they were earlier in the season in a potentially a high-scoring game. Or Matthew Stafford here against the seventh ranked New Orleans defense.
Yeah, I mean, I think here you're just going with the upside in terms of the matchup, and I think you're going with Tua, just based on these two high-powered offenses. It's in Miami. He should have Tyreek Hill back, so that's another weapon for him. Matthew Stafford going against New Orleans, sneaky good defense, I would say. So that just kind of makes me a little nervous. It is at home, so that makes it a little better, but sneaky good defense versus, what should be a high-score game. Give me Tua.
Yeah, I mean, I like Stafford. I know the defense is maybe a little concerned, but, I mean, Cooper Kupp's back, and he seems healthy. Stafford's been consistent. I mean, 22, 23, 18. Whenever you see that consistency, that sometimes means a little bit more than the matchup. Now, Tua, he's been a little up and down, 12, 9. I think Tua has more upside and has the ability to score, but I think, part of your team is you have some depth that, maybe you're looking for the consistency over the potential upside, the big scores that, maybe Dustin needs to get a win.
All right, well, you heard it here. Jake's got Howell and Stafford, and Adam has Tua and no.
I picked Howell.
You had Howell. Jake had Baker. Damn, I thought I was going to get that right. So it'll be interesting. I think it's going to all of those suggest that this is going to be another close one. A lot of guys that are very competitive fantasy players in this matchup. So with that, I think we will close it out. Any last thoughts for either of you guys? You guys aren't going to make a prediction on your game, I assume.
Nope.
Okay, yeah, that's probably a wise move. Nor will I. We will have to text Dustin to see what cocky response he may reply with. So with that, I'm Patrick. That's Adam. That's Jake in the top right. Is he in the top right for you? He's in the top right for me.
He's in the middle for
me. Oh, he's in the middle.
Yep.
Jake somewhere, Adam somewhere else. Have a good week. Good luck to Dustin and everybody in the consolation bracket this week. Bye.
See ya.
If you enjoyed the show, please remember to like and subscribe on YouTube and Spotify.